Lord Enki was a master geneticist, perhaps the best in the Orion Empire, trained directly under his mother, Queen Nektiti. He had been on many planets that still hadn't developed any life forms, and was used to toxic atmospheres and rocky deserts. Perhaps 1,000,000 Earth years, or more, had passed since the War of the Titans and the destruction of Terra, and now Enki, as a skilled scientist, was sent by his stepfather, King Anu, to explore the destroyed planet to see if anything could be rebuilt on it. Eventually, what was left of the giant planet Terra had been catapulted towards the sun due to the impact of the explosion, and one piece was relatively intact and had been taken up by the gravity from Mars and Venus and put itself in orbit around the sun, right between the two smaller planets. Terra, which once had been quite giant, was now only slightly bigger than Venus. The other part of the old Terra had become the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But not only that, when Terra exploded, Mars' atmosphere was sucked out in space as well, and lots of people died there, too. All that was left was a thin atmosphere that no one could breathe. Contrary to Terra, Mars was never rebuilt and reseeded, but once things started taking off again on Terra, Mars was repopulated as well, but only by Syrians, who built a science and a military base under Mars' surface. We have learned from many good sources that Mars was used also for genetic experiments, which continued underground after the depletion of her atmosphere. A skeleton crew of Syrians and their helpers are supposedly still there up to this very day. Enki rarely traveled in the Syrians' hollowed-out craft, unless he traveled together with them. Now he was alone in a new solar system, and this was the first time he was on Terra. He had heard so many stories about how beautiful it used to be here, and about his mother's, the Queen, experiment with the living library and the creation of the Namliu. Now, however, that all seemed to be gone. Terra was without atmosphere, and the trees, lakes, rivers, and oceans had been sucked out in space. Terra was a barren planet. Enki nano-traveled to Terra and could quickly browse the whole planet from a soul perspective and thus get a pretty good picture of how bad it was and what needed to be done. If he had had a body, he would have sighed. It would take time to rebuild this planet, but it was definitely possible. First thing he needed to do was to recreate the atmosphere and the magnetic field around the planet. Gone was the living library and all that came with it. Enki could not build such a thing on his own, or together with his scientific team. It required participation of thousands upon thousands of evolved planets, although he knew, of course, how to seed plants and animals, and also how to create higher intelligent life forms. However, his mission was to first rebuild Terra so it could become inhabitable again. The Khan Connor wanted his gold and minerals, and to be able for the Syrian workers to descend to the planet they needed a world with an atmosphere. And this required plant and animal life to create an ecosystem and a sustainable atmosphere. And Enki needed quartz in great quantities in order to create intelligent life. It was needed for the artificial wombs. After he had eventually rebuilt the atmosphere and the magnetic field, Enki let founders from near and far direct asteroids and comets towards Terra, asteroids which included specific DNA. That would help recreating the life forms on the planet, and for a while the atmosphere was bombarded with space rocks. Enki selected a team of scientists and they settled down in an area of the planet that is today the eastern part of Siberia and started building laboratories high up on a mountain, where the earth met the sky, where there was a big lake. Here was where intelligent life was going to be seeded once the reconstruction of Terra allowed it. This was where the most powerful lightning storms occurred in the beginning of time. Normally, a seeding process that could take millions, sometimes billions of years, the king wanted to be completed as fast as possible. Enki's task was to accomplish that. After Terra was destroyed, the king had lost a lot of income from his mining projects. He knew it was not going to be as lucrative as it used to be with a big chunk of the planet torn to pieces, but if he was lucky, there was still a lot of resources to dig up. So Enki did what he could to speed up the panspermia process, and soon there was thunder and lightning in the air all over the planet, igniting the seeds of life, and the first rain started. The rains became heavier and heavier and oceans started filling up. Enki and his team left the planet for a while to let everything have its time to develop. When Enki and his scientists came back, they planted forests all over the world to help with building oxygen. And Mother Terra could start breathing with her own lungs again. Life was eventually developing in the oceans, and land animals started to reappear. Terra was slowly being revived. Enki had reconstructed Terra in record time, and Terra Nova, the new Terra, was born. Some say that the word Earth is actually a name honoring Enki, whose title later changed to Ea, the god of sweet waters, thus Earth. If this is true or not is open for discussion. But this is probably a good time for me to change the name of our planet in my own story from Terra to Earth or Terra Nova, in an interchangeable fashion. In addition, Enki had genetically engineered tall and strong reptilian bodies, which he had put in storage in big tanks on Mars, where they were kept in a dormant state. They were waiting to be transferred to Nova Terra to be remained hidden in underground caverns, put away and locked into a frequency slightly above the 3D density which held the Earth signature. This way, the bodies would not be found by anybody, except by those they were meant for and had the frequency keys. When the Syrians arrived with their hollowed-out craft, themselves traveling in the nano-world, they would have perfect bodies they could use for their 3D experience. Bodies that had been tested elsewhere on other planets the Syrians had conquered. Hence, these reptilian vessels were familiar to them. The king was very pleased and gave Enki his title, Lord of Earth. The planet was again full of life forms, but there was no living library anymore. And the Namliu shepherds were gone. Enki took a long vacation and returned to the stars and didn't come back in a few thousand years. Earth needed to adjust to the quick reconstruction, and different plants and animals needed to be able to be synchronized into this young ecological system. When he came back, everything was working just the way he had planned.